Hi, everyone. I'm going to read number 5 today. I pulled it up to skim first before hitting the record button. I do this because some of these things are really old. This is an old one. I didn't just write it. And I want to know what it says before I hit the record button. And this one, it felt a little boring first off, but I'll get to it. But it's about Harry Potter, partly about Harry Potter. And I realized that J.K. Rowling has been kind of ostracized, at least in like Twitter communities. An attempt at cancellation has been made, but I don't believe that cancellation is a good reaction to anything. I don't think there's ever a person who was born or an event that occurred that we should expunge from consideration, from conversation, right? That we should ensure that we don't learn from it. Make believing people out of existence, that sort of fantasy, to me, is not innocuous, right? It is tragic in its intellectual poverty, its moral lack of growth. What I see us doing, maybe I'm wrong, right? I'm happy to be shown an argument that shows me wrong, but we have this worldview, and they seem to be puny. But our world, yours, mine, everyone else, we have these puny worldviews, but we barricade them against the onslaught of contrasting opinion. God forbid that a voice that antagonizes our own be permitted entry. And why do we do this? Why are we doing this? And it is my opinion that we do it out of fear, right? Just, I think that we live in sheer terror that there's going to be wisdom harbored, right, in those arrows or battering ram or whatever is gonna have some wise, contrarian position that upsets our worldview. Because think about who we watch Netflix, as though Netflix is a show. Like, scroll through Netflix, and what do you see? What I see when I scroll through shows is 1,000 shows about serial killers. We are so eager to listen to every word that a serial killer has to say. But we don't cancel them. Serial killers don't get canceled, okay? Because everyone knows it's bad. Nobody is at risk, maybe not nobody, but essentially nobody is at risk of listening to the words of a serial killer and like, oh man, they were right. I'm in the wrong here. Okay. So we don't cancel them. We just keep those things coming. Who do we cancel? Who do we exile from the Netflix community? It's worth making that comparison. And the phenomenon of sort of preventing these people from having a voice, I don't think it's new. I know for a fact it's not new. The Beatles were canceled. You can find pictures of the bonfires of vinyl. That doesn't strike me as a healthy thing to do in terms of the fumes. But there were people literally crucifying the Beatles albums. This seems creepy, but why were people canceling the Beatles? And this was, before you could do it on Twitter, you had to do it with a bonfire. Why were people doing that? Well, they made a comparison to themselves. I think Lennon did, to bigger than Jesus or whatever. Jesus was canceled. Read the Gospels, right? Read the Gospels, and here's a guy who, it doesn't matter what you believe, just read this historical account, right? I'm not making a religious argument here. This old historical account of a guy who made some, what people perceive as threatening claims, some uncomfortable claims, perhaps disagreeable claims. And he was canceled for those. Now, cancellation back then was called crucifixion, right? And I'm sure it went by many other names depending on how it was enacted. But in the intervening years since then to J.K. Rowling, I don't think cancellation has lost any of its violence. Again, go to Twitter, go read Twitter. And what people are calling for with J.K. Rowling, it's comparable. It doesn't seem to have lost its corporeal nature. And this seems to me unfortunate for so many reasons, not just the canceled, right? But coming from academia, everything warrants, it's a learning environment, right? And what doesn't help, what is not helpful is clenched fists, okay, exclamation points, veining throats as people lash out at one another. None of that stuff is helpful. When in history has an eraser profited us, right? Removing things from history books, removing them from classrooms and discussion and learning. When was that good for us? I mean, just look back at this long history of cancellation. Okay, I don't think it began with Jesus, right? This is old, and we've been doing it forever, and we're not on a win streak for the outcomes. Now, just because you're learning from something, just because you're paying attention in a sober, non-reactive way, doesn't mean you agree with it. To hear words and listen and hear the reason is not synonymous with me too. I agree, absolutely, exclamation points of my own. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is we should stop being so frightened of one another. That fear gives us a perception of threat. Right? We perceive threat where there really shouldn't be any. And what does threat do? I mean, what does a skunk do when it's threatened? What does a dog do? What do we do when we're threatened? We seem to cancel and we seem to lash out with violence. And I think compassion is all we really have, especially in the age of AI. Compassion as a culture is the best thing that we have, the most ethical and intellectual response we can have. And how do we enact it, right? Listen, understand each other, turn an honest ear, a sincere ear to the person who is speaking, but we don't do that. We'll do it with murderers again. Well, we will eagerly listen to a murderer because we're interested, right? But like in J.K. Rowling's case, we are so insistent, so violent in our effort to silence who is like the victim of sexual abuse. This seems weird, but oh, quick, give me the murderer. I just find it so weird. Now, nothing that I'm saying is choosing sides. Nothing that I have said, if you listen, is establishing a political position. Nothing is even close to supporting one side or the other. All I'm saying is that we should be compassionate, okay? And what I perceive, in my opinion, as the very opposite of human empathy, I mean, just the enemy of compassion is cancellation. I don't think we should be doing that, especially in the age of AI, where we have nothing but compassion to give. Okay, with that, just kind of long preamble, I am going to pull up today's journal. Where it is. Okay. I'm still looking for it. Okay. Number 5, August 28th, 2021, Worldbuilding. Hi, everyone. When I read Harry Potter for the first time, my favorite character was Hogwarts. When I read it for the second time, Hogwarts was even favoriter in my estimation. The living world had a genuine and genuinely lovable personality. A long history of tragedy and triumph twisted the architecture it became, shaping who it is today. In particular, it was the suffering it endured in its past that prepared it for the perils that haunt its future. And when it finally encounters that seemingly impossible challenge, it struggles to the end of its bricks, which is where it finds the inner resources to prevail in the most unlikely of places and in the most satisfying of ways. Insert logo of Harry's glasses and forehead death tattoo. That is the arc of a leading role. If I'm attempting to be objective in my rankings, I would say Hogwarts is a character nearly as important as Harry and considerably more important than Hermione, and more interesting than both of them combined. I don't mean to say that it's every landscape's burden to also serve as a protagonist. That would start to feel like a David Attenborough retelling of Ocean's 11, but world building, that parental art of rearing a land into imagination, can be a wonderful form of character development. It just can't be the first one developed. It never seems to be in the most successful stories. The info dump, i.e. world building, is always delayed until after the stereotypical hero and villain roles have been sympathetically introduced. The stories that blitz into the info dump too rashly don't seem to find themselves on prominent shelves in bookstores. But historically, the two groups have had something in common, a penchant for page one maps. This has always been my favorite and least favorite part of fantasy literature. Favorite. Maps are what I love most about these books, and I know exactly where to find them. Least favorite. Inserting a map so arbitrarily feels slightly cheap. Did Huckleberry Finn or The Great Gatsby begin with a map? No? Then why would anything else? That's my logic. But at the same time, you really do need the map. It's difficult to orient oneself without it. My solution was to integrate the map into the plot in an unspecified spoiler-free way here, and package it with a collection of corresponding epistles. Together, these works endeavor to develop the long backstory of Gaia, in particular, the tragedies and triumphs which have shaped its features and prepared it for the great perils that haunt its future. But without the brazen comparison to a wizarding institution in the Scottish Highlands, of course. Comparing oneself to the godmother is a breach of something far graver than etiquette. With everlasting humility, me. Okay, that was number 5, and I hope you have a compassionate day filled with humility and activities that you would derive pleasure from. And bye, everyone.